Welcome to Slumbertainment. Drift off, leave a like when you wake, and let me know where you'd like to dream next. Tonight's journey, Skyrim, Riften to Solitude. The morning mist clings to Riften's wooden walls like a veil. The canals lie quiet, their water still except for the soft ripple of a passing fish. From the market, a faint scent of honey and baked bread drifts on the chill air. The guards at the gate nod without a word as you step beyond the city's shadow and onto the road that winds west toward the open wilds of Skyrim. Your pack settles comfortably across your shoulders, and the pull towards solitude, distant, barely more than an intention, guides your first steps into the wide world beyond. Your boots press softly into damp earth. Behind you, the faint sound of Riften's bells fades until only the whisper of wind through birch leaves remains. The forest east of Lake Honrick spreads wide and silver in the morning light. Frost sparkles on moss and bark, catching the sun in 1,000 tiny prisms. Somewhere to the west, a woodpecker taps in steady rhythm against hollow wood. The world wakes slowly around you, and every breath of cold air feels clean, unhurried. A fox moves through the underbrush ahead, its coat rust-red against the pale grass. It pauses, ears swiveling towards you, then continues its hunt without concern. The forest knows you mean no harm. The road curves gently through groves of birch and aspen. Sunlight breaks through the branches in narrow bands, lighting dust motes that dance in the air like tiny insects. You pass a small shrine to Mara, its stone polished smooth by years of weather and the touch of countless travellers. Offerings of mountain flowers and river stones rest at its base, faded but still intentional. The scent of mountain thyme mixes with the crisp smell of pine needles crushed underfoot. You pause there for a moment, running your fingers along the carved symbols, feeling the cool stone drink the warmth from your skin. The silence feels deep, not empty, but listening. As you continue, the birch trees give way to denser pine. Their trunks rise straight and dark, and the canopy thickens overhead until the forest floor lies in perpetual shade. Mushrooms cluster around the bases of old stumps, white caps and brown gills, some glowing faintly with a pale blue luminescence. You recognize them as glowing mushrooms, common in these shadowed places, and gather a few carefully into your pack. The air here smells of rich earth and decay, of life feeding on what came before. A jay calls sharply from somewhere high above, and a thrush answers with softer, rolling notes. Every sound blends into a rhythm the forest seems to breathe in time with. The path narrows as it approaches the southern shore of Lake Honrick. Through gaps in the trees, you catch glimpses of water, dark and still, reflecting the grey-blue sky. Reeds grow thick along the marshy edges, rustling softly as unseen birds move through them. You step out into open air, and the lake spreads before you like hammered silver. Ducks trace slow ripples near the far shore, their calls echoing faintly across the water. The breeze that comes off the lake carries a wet chill, smelling faintly of iron and reeds and the cold depths beneath. You sit on a flat stone by the water's edge, feeling the slow warmth of the sun begin to seep through your cloak. Time loosens its hold here. Dragonflies hover in slow, measured flight, their wings catching sunlight in brief flashes of emerald and gold. A heron lifts from the shallows, its reflection breaking the lake's surface as it rises silently into the open air, long legs trailing behind. You watch the water shift as the wind passes over it, soft waves spreading outward in patterns that overlap and dissolve. Somewhere far across the lake, a fisherman's boat sits motionless, a dark speck against the distant shore. The moment feels suspended, held in perfect balance between motion and stillness. When you rise, the path continues along the lake's edge for a time before bending southwest toward the mountains. Snow-capped peaks frame the horizon, pale blue against the sky. You know that somewhere beyond them, past valleys and holes you've never seen, Solitude waits. A city of stone and sea, distant as a legend. But the thought carries no weight, no urgency. For now, there is only the road, the scent of pine and water, and the soft rhythm of your own footsteps. The day stretches on, quiet and steady. You pass through clearings where spring has begun its slow work. Purple crocuses push through old leaves, and the first green shoots of ferns uncurl in sheltered spots. Birds busy themselves with the serious work of nesting, carrying twigs and moss in their beaks. A rabbit bounds across the path, white tail flashing, and disappears into a thicket of juniper. Everything moves with purpose, but without haste. As the sun lowers, the forest exhales the scent of evening, cool water, damp soil, distant smoke from unseen hearths. You follow the sound of running water until you find its source, a small stream tumbling over smooth stones, spilling into a pool surrounded by ferns and moss-covered rocks. The water runs clear and cold, tasting of stone and sky when you cup your hands to drink. You set down your pack beside it and gather deadwood from the forest floor. The kindling catches easily, and soon a small fire crackles beside the pool, its light warm against the gathering dusk. You unwrap a portion of bread and cheese from your pack, eating slowly as the stars begin to appear overhead. The constellations emerge one by one. The warrior, the thief, the mage, their patterns as familiar as old friends. The soft chirp of crickets fills the air, and somewhere distant, an owl calls into the darkness. You wrap yourself in your bedroll near the gentle rush of the stream, watching sparks rise from the fire and disappear into the night sky. The world outside Riften has opened wide, patient and vast, and you are only at its threshold. You wake to pale dawn light filtering through the canopy. The air smells of cold ash and dew-soaked earth. Your fire has burned down to grey embers, barely warm to the touch. The stream beside your camp murmurs its constant song, unchanged from the night before. You stretch stiff muscles and breathe deeply, tasting the crispness of morning, pine resin, wet stone, and the faint sweetness of early wildflowers opening somewhere nearby. The forest feels different in this light, softer somehow, as though the night has gentled its edges. You pack your belongings with deliberate care, rolling the bedroll tight and securing it to your pack. A handful of dried fruit and a piece of hard bread serve as breakfast, eaten standing as you watch mist rise from the stream in thin wisps. A dipper bird works the shallows, bobbing and diving with mechanical precision, completely absorbed in its search for insects. It pays you no attention at all. When you step back onto the path, your boots leave dark prints in the frost-silvered grass, and within moments the forest swallows the campsite behind you as though you were never there. The road continues southwest, climbing gradually as it leaves the lake behind. The birch trees thin and give way to towering pines that cast the forest floor into cool shadow. Ferns grow thick here, their fronds unfurling in tight spirals of new spring growth. You brush past them, feeling the dampness transfer to your cloak. Somewhere high above, a raven calls, 3 sharp cries that echo between the trunks before fading into silence. The sound feels ancient, as though it has been calling in exactly this way for 1,000 years. The trail narrows and becomes rockier as the land rises. Roots cross the path like thick ropes, worn smooth by countless feet. You step carefully over them, mindful of your footing on the uneven ground. Occasionally you pass small cairns, stacks of stones left by other travellers, markers of safe passage or simple offerings to the road itself. You add a stone to one as you pass, feeling the satisfying weight of it settle into place. The gesture feels right, a small acknowledgement of those who walked here before you and those who will come after. By mid-morning, you reach a clearing where the sun breaks through in full force. Wildflowers have claimed the space, purple mountain flowers, white snowberries beginning to bud, and clusters of yellow blooms you don't recognize but admire nonetheless. Bees move between them with lazy purpose, their hum rising and falling like a pulse. You kneel beside a patch of lavender, crushing a few leaves between your fingers to release their scent. The smell is sharp and clean, cutting through the heavier forest odours. You gather a small bundle and tuck it into your pack, knowing it will keep moths away from your spare clothes and leave everything smelling of summer. The path leads you to a fork in the road. To the left, the trail continues south toward the mountains. To the right, it bends west through lower country. You choose the western route, following the gentle curve of the land as it descends into a shallow valley. The trees here are mixed, pine and birch growing side by side, with the occasional oak spreading its branches wide. Squirrels chase each other along the limbs, chittering in mock alarm, and a woodpecker hammers somewhere out of sight. The forest feels alive with small movements and sounds, each creature absorbed in its own concerns. As the sun climbs higher, you come upon a fallen log crossing a small ravine. The stream far below rushes over rocks, white with foam. The log is thick and solid, worn smooth by weather, and you cross carefully, placing each foot with attention. On the far side, the land opens into rolling hills covered in tall grass. The transition is gradual but unmistakable, the dense forest giving way to open country where the sky stretches wider and the wind moves unobstructed across the land. You follow a trader's path through the grass, marked by the ruts of wagon wheels and the compressed earth of many feet. Ahead, you can see a lone farmstead tucked into a fold of hills, a small house with smoke rising from its chimney, a barn, and fields where rows of young crops push through dark soil. A dog barks in the distance, the sound carrying clearly across the open space. You pass by at a respectful distance, offering a wave to a figure working in the field. They straighten, wave back, and return to their work. The exchange is brief and wordless, but it carries the warmth of human recognition in this wide landscape. The afternoon brings you to the edge of a larger settlement, barely more than a cluster of houses around a crossroads, but substantial enough to have a small inn. The sign above the door shows a painted tankard and a bed. Inside, the air smells of wood smoke and roasted meat. A fire crackles in the hearth, and a few locals sit at rough-hewn tables, their conversation low and comfortable. The innkeeper, a broad woman with grey-streaked hair, nods as you enter. You exchange a few coins for bread, cheese, and a bowl of vegetable stew thick with carrots and potatoes. The food is simple but warm, and after a morning of walking, it tastes like the finest feast. You eat slowly, listening to the rhythm of conversation around you without following the words. Someone laughs, low and genuine. A chair scrapes against the floor. Outside, a horse whinnies and a cart rumbles past. These are the sounds of ordinary life continuing in its patterns, and there is something deeply comforting in being part of it, even briefly. When you finish, you purchase a few supplies, more bread, some dried meat, a small wheel of hard cheese, and step back into the afternoon light. The road west beckons. You can see it stretching ahead, winding through the hills toward distant mountains that rise like a jagged wall against the horizon. The path to Solitude is long, but each step carries you forward, steady and sure. You adjust your pack and walk on, leaving the settlement behind. The grass bends in waves under the wind, and somewhere far above, a hawk circles on still wings, riding the invisible currents of air. The world feels vast and open, full of distance yet entirely present in each moment. The crunch of gravel beneath your boots, the warmth of sun on your face, the endless ribbon of road unwinding ahead. The afternoon light slants golden across the hills as you leave the settlement behind. The road continues west, climbing gradually through country that grows wilder with each mile. The farms and tilled fields give way to unclaimed land, tall grass dotted with wildflowers, clusters of juniper and mountain laurel, and the occasional stand of birch growing white and slender against the deeper green of distant pines. The air carries the scent of sage and warming earth, and when the wind shifts, you catch the faint smell of snow from the mountains still far ahead. You walk at an easy pace, following the curve of the land as it rises and falls. Hawks wheel overhead, their shadows racing across the grass. In the distance, you can see the ruins of an old watchtower, its stones blackened by some ancient fire. Moss and vines have claimed it now, softening its edges until it seems almost part of the landscape itself, a reminder that people have travelled these roads for longer than memory holds. You don't approach it, content to let it keep its silence, but you mark its position as you pass, a landmark along your journey west. The path leads you down into a shallow valley where a creek runs clear and cold over smooth river stones. You kneel at its edge to refill your water skin, feeling the shock of cold water against your fingers. Small fish dart in the shallows, minnows, silver and quick, disappearing under rocks when your shadow falls across them. You drink deeply, tasting stone and sky, and the faint mineral tang of deep earth. A frog sits motionless on a wet stone, its throat pulsing, eyes watching you with ancient patience. When you stand, it doesn't move. Beyond the creek, the land rises more steeply. The grass grows shorter here, tougher, mixed with patches of heather beginning to show the first hints of purple bloom. Your legs feel the climb, but it's a good ache, the kind that comes from honest work. You pause halfway up the slope to look back the way you came. The valley spreads below, green and gold in the afternoon light, the creek a silver thread winding through it. Far behind you can just make out the cluster of buildings where you stopped for lunch, already distant, already becoming memory. At the crest of the hill, the wind picks up, cooler and stronger. You can see further now, miles of rolling country stretching west and south, forest and field in a patchwork that seems to go on forever. And there, far to the southwest, a dark smudge against the horizon, smoke rising from what must be a larger town. You consult the map you carry, tracing the road with your finger. Helgen lies in that direction, or what remains of it. The stories say it burned years ago, but people have a way of rebuilding, of refusing to let a place die completely. You descend the far side of the hill into denser forest. The pines grow thick here, their needles carpeting the ground in a layer so deep your footsteps make almost no sound. The light filters green through the canopy, and the air feels hushed, expectant. Mushrooms grow in clusters around the bases of trees, red-capped fly amanitas that you know better than to touch, and shelf fungi spreading like wooden platforms up dead trunks. A spider has built her web between two young trees, and dewdrops cling to the silk, each one holding a tiny, perfect world of light. The forest path winds between ancient trees, some so thick it would take 3 people with joined hands to circle them. Their bark is deeply furrowed, and moss grows on their northern sides in thick, soft cushions. You run your hand along one as you pass, feeling the texture rough against your palm, alive with slow, patient growth. These trees were old when your grandparents were young, and they'll stand long after you've walked on. There's something reassuring in that, the continuity of the forest, the way it persists regardless of the small dramas of human life. As the afternoon deepens toward evening, you begin to watch for a place to camp. The forest feels safe enough, and you've seen no signs of anything more threatening than a startled deer that bounded away at your approach, white tail flashing. You find what you're looking for as the light begins to fade. A small clearing beside a spring that bubbles up from between rocks, forming a pool no larger than a wash basin before trickling away into the moss. The ground is level and dry, sheltered by overhanging branches. It feels like a place that has welcomed travellers before. You gather wood methodically, choosing pieces that will burn clean and long. The spring provides fresh water, cold and sweet, and you drink your fill before setting about making camp. The fire catches quickly, and soon its warmth pushes back the evening chill. You prepare a simple meal, bread and cheese, some of the dried meat from the inn, a handful of berries you gathered earlier in the day. The food is plain but satisfying, and you eat slowly, watching the light change through the trees as the sun sinks below the horizon. Night comes gently to the forest. The birds' evening songs fade into the deeper sounds of darkness. The hoot of an owl somewhere close, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, the constant whisper of wind moving through pine needles. You add more wood to the fire and watch sparks rise toward the emerging stars. The constellations appear slowly, their patterns familiar and constant. The thief stands low in the southern sky, and high above the mage spreads his arms wide. You've known these stars your whole life, and seeing them here, far from home, is like meeting old friends on a distant road. You wrap yourself in your bedroll, positioned close enough to the fire to feel its warmth, but far enough to avoid the smoke. The ground beneath you is soft with accumulated pine needles, and you can hear the spring's gentle trickle nearby. Your thoughts drift without urgency, back to Riften's morning mist, forward to Solitude's distant walls. But mostly they settle here, in this quiet clearing, in this present moment. The forest breathes around you, ancient and alive, and you are a small, safe part of it. Sleep comes easily, carried on the smoke of your fire and the endless patience of the pines. The morning breaks clear and blue. Thin frost glitters on the grass as you leave the shelter of the pines and step into open country. The air feels lighter now, carrying the scent of wood smoke from distant hearths and the faint sweetness of thawing earth. The mountains ahead stand immense and silver, their peaks lost in thin cloud. Beyond them lies the pass that will carry you toward Falkreath, but for now they seem impossibly far, a wall at the edge of the world. The path westward follows the curve of a frozen stream. Patches of ice crack softly under the warmth of day, releasing the quiet sound of running water beneath. You walk beside it, watching reflections shift and scatter with every ripple. The rhythm of your steps matches the stream's flow, steady, unhurried. Occasionally you startle a small bird from the reeds, and it bursts into flight with a flutter of brown wings, calling its alarm before settling again further downstream. The world feels fresh and new, as though spring is taking its first tentative steps into being. By mid-morning, you reach a wide meadow where a herd of elk grazes in silence. Their breath rises in small plumes, white against the cool air. One lifts its head briefly as you approach, ears swiveling towards you, dark eyes assessing. It watches for a long moment, then returns to feeding, deeming you no threat. The others don't even look up. You skirt the edge of the meadow, giving them space, and they continue their breakfast as though you're merely another feature of the landscape, no more remarkable than a tree or a stone. Beyond the meadow, the land begins to roll gently upward again. Birch trees give way to mountain ash, their branches showing the first hints of new leaf buds. The scent of sap thickens in the warming air, sweet and resinous. You find a small cairn by the roadside, a simple stack of stones crowned with a single sprig of dried juniper. Someone passed here not long ago, leaving a quiet sign of safe travel. You add one more stone before moving on, continuing the tradition of travellers acknowledging travellers, a silent conversation across time. The road begins to climb more earnestly now, switchbacking up a long slope. Your breathing deepens with the effort, and you feel your heart working steadily in your chest. It's good to move like this, to feel your body doing what it was made to do. You pause occasionally to look back, watching the valley spread wider below with each turn of the trail. The meadow where the elk grazed is a patch of gold, the stream a silver thread, the forest a dark green blanket spreading east toward Riften, now days behind you. At the top of the rise the wind shifts. It carries a low, distant sound that at first seems like thunder. You pause, scanning the horizon. Far above, a dragon crosses the sky, slow, graceful, its wings catching the light like polished steel. It moves west, vanishing behind a ridge without sound or fire, leaving only the soft echo of its passage in memory. Your heart quickens slightly, the old instinctive wariness rising, but the dragon shows no interest in the land below. It's simply travelling, as you are, following its own unknowable path. The world feels wider for its passing, older, touched by something beyond the ordinary rhythms of road and weather. You continue downward now, the trail descending into a forested valley. Tall pines rise on either side, their trunks straight and dark. Sunlight filters through in narrow golden beams, illuminating the forest floor in patches. A cluster of mushrooms here, a fallen log thick with moss there, a pool of standing water reflecting the canopy above. The air smells rich with decay and growth, that peculiar forest scent of things ending and beginning in the same breath. A red squirrel scolds you from a high branch, chittering its displeasure at your intrusion, and you can't help but smile at its boldness. The path opens into a small glade, where a clear pool lies at its centre. The water mirrors the sky so perfectly it seems a doorway into another world. Clouds drifting across its surface, the dark shapes of trees inverted and trembling with each breath of wind. You kneel to drink, the chill biting but clean, tasting of stone and sky. A dragonfly hovers near the water's edge, its wings a blur of iridescent blue. It lands on a reed, and you can see its compound eyes, its segmented body, the delicate architecture of its wings. For a moment, you and the dragonfly regard each other, two travellers pausing at the same watering hole, and then it lifts away, following the shoreline in erratic loops. You rest here for a while, sitting on a smooth boulder at the pool's edge. The sun has reached its peak, warming the stone beneath you. You eat a simple lunch, bread and cheese, an apple that's begun to soften but still tastes sweet. A family of ducks paddles across the pool, the ducklings trailing their mother in a neat line, their tiny feet paddling furiously beneath the surface. The mother quacks softly, and the ducklings answer in high, piping voices. The scene is so peaceful, so perfectly ordinary, that it settles something in your chest you didn't realize was tense. When you rise to continue, the afternoon has begun its slow descent toward evening. The trail leads north now, winding through stands of tall pines where the air grows cooler in the shade. You can feel the land changing around you, becoming wilder, less touched by human hands. The trees grow closer together, and the underbrush thickens, ferns and brambles, wild rose bushes showing thorns and the promise of summer blooms. A fox crosses the path ahead, carrying something in its mouth. It glances your way but doesn't pause, trotting purposefully into the undergrowth and disappearing like smoke. As dusk approaches, you reach the ruins you glimpsed from the hills. What remains of Helgen spreads before you. Blackened timbers, tumbled stone walls, the skeleton of what was once a thriving town. Wildflowers grow in the spaces where houses stood, and saplings push up through charred floorboards. Nature is slowly reclaiming the space, softening the scars of old violence. You walk through carefully, respectfully, aware that this was a place where people lived and died, loved and worked and raised children. Now it's quiet, home only to birds nesting in broken rafters and rabbits that have burrowed beneath fallen walls. Near what must have been the town square, you find a small memorial. A cairn built from stones pulled from the rubble, topped with a carved wooden dragon, weathered but still recognizable. Flowers have been left recently, their petals not yet brown. Someone still remembers. Someone still comes here to honor the dead. You stand before it for a long moment, then add a stone of your own to the pile. The gesture feels inadequate, but it's what you have to offer. You make camp just beyond the ruins, in a grove of birch trees where the ground rises slightly, providing a view back toward the broken town and forward toward the darker forests of Falkreath. Your fire crackles cheerfully, pushing back the gathering darkness. The stars emerge one by one, sharp and clear in the spring sky. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls, a sound neither threatening nor close, simply part of the great balance of night. You lie back in your bedroll, watching smoke from your fire rise toward the stars, and think about ruins and rebuilding, about how places hold memory long after people have gone. Sleep comes slowly tonight, thoughtful and deep. You wake to pale dawn light spilling through the birch branches. The air smells of cold ash and dew, and a light mist hovers just above the ground, turning the world soft and uncertain. The ruins of Helgen stand silent in the grey morning, their broken walls like the bones of some ancient creature half buried in earth. You pack your belongings quietly, as though reluctant to disturb the stillness, and turn your steps west, leaving the ghosts of the old town to their rest. The road descends into deeper forest, the great pine woods of Falkreath hold, where the trees grow so thick that even at midday the light comes filtered and green. The air here is different, heavier somehow, rich with the scent of needles and sap and dark earth. Moss grows thick on every surface, tree trunks, fallen logs, even the stones that line the path. Your footsteps are nearly silent on the soft forest floor, and the quiet feels almost sacred, as though you've entered some vast and ancient hall where voices should be hushed. The path is well worn but narrow, winding between massive pines that must be centuries old. Their trunks rise straight and branchless for the first 30 feet, then spread into dark canopies that block the sky. Occasionally, a shaft of sunlight breaks through, illuminating the motes of dust and pollen that drift in the still air. In one such beam, you see a spider's web stretched between two saplings, each thread outlined in light, dewdrops hanging like tiny jewels. The spider sits at the centre, patient and still, waiting for whatever the day might bring. By mid-morning, you hear the sound of running water. The path leads you to a stream, wider than those you've crossed before, rushing white over black rocks. A wooden bridge spans it, old but solid, its timbers darkened by weather and worn smooth by countless feet. You pause in the middle, leaning on the rail to watch the water tumble past below. The sound is constant and soothing, a white noise that seems to wash thought clean. A dipper bird works the rocks below, bobbing and dipping, diving briefly beneath the surface before emerging to shake water from its feathers. It moves with absolute focus, completely absorbed in its hunt for aquatic insects. On the far side of the bridge, you notice movement at the forest edge. A dog emerges from the undergrowth, rangy and mud-coloured, with one ear that stands up and one that flops down. It stops when it sees you, tail lowering uncertainly. You can see its ribs pressing against its coat, and its eyes hold that particular wariness of an animal that has learned humans can be kind or cruel in equal measure. You crouch slowly, making yourself smaller, less threatening, and speak softly. The dog's tail gives a tentative wag. You reach into your pack and pull out a piece of the dried meat, tossing it gently toward the dog. It snatches the food from the ground and backs away a few steps, chewing quickly, eyes never leaving you. You toss another piece, closer this time. The dog approaches, still cautious but interested now, hunger overcoming fear. You let it sniff your hand, then scratch gently behind that flopped ear. The dog leans into the touch, and you feel its tension ease slightly. When you stand and continue walking, the dog follows at a distance, trailing you like a shadow through the forest. The miles pass easily with company, even silent company. The dog ranges back and forth across the trail, investigating scents and sounds you can't perceive, but always circling back to check your position. By noon, it's walking closer, sometimes trotting just ahead as though showing you the way. You share your lunch, bread and cheese, more of the dried meat, and the dog accepts each offering with gentle teeth, careful not to nip fingers. After eating, it sits beside you while you rest, and you run your hand along its rough coat, feeling the warmth of its body, the steady rise and fall of its breathing. The afternoon brings you to a place where the forest opens slightly around a small lake. The water is dark, almost black, reflecting the dense pines that crowd its shores. Lily pads float near the edges, and you can hear frogs calling from the reeds, their voices rising and falling in overlapping chorus. The dog wades into the shallows to drink, lapping noisily, then bounds back to shake water all over you. You laugh, the first sound you've made in hours, and the dog's tail wags furiously at your reaction, pleased to have entertained. You follow the lake's edge for perhaps a mile, the path soft with pine needles, the air cool and still. A family of ducks paddles across the water, and the dog watches them with intense interest, but makes no move to chase. You're grateful for its restraint. At the far end of the lake, the trail climbs again, rising toward a ridge that promises a view of the country ahead. The dog follows without hesitation, panting slightly with the effort but keeping pace. From the ridgetop, you can see the forest stretching west and south, a dark green ocean broken occasionally by the silver thread of a stream, or the lighter green of a meadow. Far to the west, the land rises toward the mountains again, the peaks that mark the border with the reach. Somewhere beyond those mountains, still days away, lies Solitude. But between here and there lies the town of Falkreath itself. And you think you can see smoke rising in that direction, the thin grey columns of hearth fires from a settlement tucked among the pines. You descend the far side of the ridge as the sun begins its slow slide toward evening. The light grows golden, slanting through the trees in long dusty beams. The dog trots beside you now, no longer trailing at a cautious distance, and occasionally its shoulder brushes against your leg. There's something deeply companionable about the silence between you, two creatures walking the same road, each finding comfort in the other's presence. As dusk approaches, you find a small clearing beside a spring that bubbles up from mossy rocks. The water is cold and clean, and both you and the dog drink deeply. You build a fire as the light fades, and the dog settles close to its warmth, curling into a tight ball with its nose tucked under its tail. You cook a simple meal over the flames, a bannock made from flour and water, cooked on a flat stone, and more of the dried meat softened in hot water. You share half of everything with the dog, who accepts each piece with a gentle mouth and grateful eyes. The stars emerge slowly through the pine canopy, scattered diamonds in the darkening blue. The fire crackles and pops, sending sparks upward to join them. The dog sighs deeply, already asleep, its body twitching occasionally in dreams. You sit watching the flames, feeling the day's miles in your legs, the pleasant tiredness of honest travel. Tomorrow you'll reach Falkreath, and perhaps the day after you'll continue west. Or perhaps you'll rest for a day or two, letting your supplies and your spirit both replenish. For now, there's only this moment, the fire's warmth, the dog's quiet breathing, the endless whispering of wind through pine needles. You add more wood to the fire and settle into your bedroll, letting sleep rise like a gentle tide to carry you away. Morning arrives with the soft patter of rain on leaves. You wake to find the world transformed, grey and hushed, the forest drinking deeply after days of clear weather. The dog is already awake, sitting at the edge of your camp with its ears pricked forward, watching the rain fall. Droplets bead on its rough coat, and it turns to look at you as you stir, tail wagging once in greeting. You build up the fire from last night's embers, coaxing it back to life, and warm your hands before packing up the damp bedroll. The rain is gentle, steady, the kind that will last most of the day. You fashion a rough hood from a piece of oiled canvas in your pack, draping it over your head and shoulders. The dog doesn't seem to mind the weather at all, trotting ahead with its tail held high, occasionally stopping to shake water from its coat in explosive bursts. You follow the trail west, your boots squelching softly in mud that's already forming on the path. The sound of rain on 10,000 pine needles creates a constant whisper, like the forest itself is breathing. Everything looks different in the rain. Colours deepen. The green of moss becomes almost luminous. The dark bark of trees turns black and gleaming. Water drips from every surface, forming tiny streams that run down trunks and gather in hollows. You pass through a grove, where shelf fungi grow in layered tiers up dead-standing trees, and the rain has made them swell and darken, their surfaces slick and smooth. A salamander, bright orange against the dark earth, moves slowly across the path. You step carefully around it, and the dog sniffs curiously, but leaves it in peace. The miles feel longer in the rain, each step requiring a bit more attention on the slippery ground. But there's something meditative about it too. The steady rhythm of water falling, the muted sounds, the way the rain draws a curtain around you, making the world feel smaller, more intimate. You stop beneath a particularly large pine whose lower branches spread wide, creating a partial shelter. The dog shakes itself again, spraying water in a wide arc, then sits pressed against your leg while you share a cold breakfast of bread and dried apple. By late morning, the forest begins to thin. Through the rain you can make out cleared land ahead, fields and fences, the signs of human habitation. The path widens and improves, drainage ditches on either side keeping the worst of the mud at bay. You pass a farmhouse set back from the road, smoke rising from its chimney despite the rain. A child's toy, a wooden horse, lies abandoned in the yard, and chickens huddle miserably under the eaves of a small coop. A woman appears in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl, and raises her hand in greeting. You wave back, and she disappears inside, leaving you to the rain and the road. Falkreath appears gradually through the grey curtain of weather. First the outlying buildings, a mill beside a stream swollen with runoff, a tannery whose smell carries even in the rain, a cluster of modest homes with vegetable gardens turned to mud. Then the town proper, nestled in a clearing among the pines, built of dark timber and grey stone that seems to absorb what little light the cloudy sky provides. A graveyard spreads on a hillside at the town's edge, its stones standing silent in the rain, some old and tilted, others newer and straight. Even in the weather, there's something peaceful about it, as though the dead rest easily here among the trees. The dog follows you into town without hesitation, staying close as you navigate the muddy streets. People hurry past with hoods pulled up and heads down, intent on reaching shelter. You make your way toward the inn, a substantial building near the town centre, its windows glowing with warm light. The sign shows a dead man's drink, an odd name but welcoming nonetheless. You push open the heavy door, and warmth and noise spill out. Voices and laughter, the crackle of a large fire, the smell of food and wet wool and pine smoke. The innkeeper, a gnawed man with a greying beard, looks up from where he's wiping the bar. His eyes flick to the dog at your side, and you see him weighing whether to object. Before he can speak, you place coins on the bar, enough for a room and a meal, and a bit extra. The dog's well behaved, you say. Won't be any trouble. The innkeeper considers for a moment, then sweeps the coins into his hand with a shrug. Room at the top of the stairs. Second door. Keep it off the furniture. You nod your thanks. The room is small but dry, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looks out over the town's main street. The dog immediately claims a corner, circling 3 times before lying down with a contented sigh. You peel off your wet outer layers and hang them on pegs near the door, then use the wash basin to clean the mud from your hands and face. The water is cold but refreshing, and you feel the grime of travel washing away. When you look in the small cloudy mirror above the basin, you see yourself looking back, weathered by sun and wind, but content, alive in a way that has nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with purpose. Downstairs, the common room is full but not crowded. You find a table near the fire and settle into a chair that creaks but holds. A serving girl brings stew without being asked, thick with venison and root vegetables, rich and steaming, along with fresh bread still warm from the oven and a mug of ale that's dark and malty. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, feeling the warmth spread through your body. The dog appears at your knee, and you slip it pieces of meat under the table, trying to be subtle. The serving girl sees but only smiles and says nothing. The conversation around you washes over in fragments. 2 men arguing good-naturedly about the best way to cure hides. A woman telling her companion about a strange light she saw in the forest. an old-timer holding forth about how winters were colder when he was young, and summers hotter, and everything generally better or worse depending on which suited his story. It's the comfortable noise of people who know each other, who share this place and its concerns, and you're content to sit at the edge of it, warm and fed and sheltered from the rain. As evening deepens, the rain continues its steady drumming on the roof. Someone produces a lute and begins playing, nothing fancy, just simple melodies that invite humming along. A few people do, their voices blending with the music and the rain and the crackle of the fire into something that feels like the essence of shelter, of community, of being safely inside while the world outside is wet and dark. You finish your ale and order another, letting the warmth and the music and the weariness of the road all settle into your bones. When you finally climb the stairs to your room, the dog follows at your heels. The bed is narrow, but the mattress is stuffed with clean straw, and the blankets, though worn, are thick and warm. You lie down with a sigh, and the dog settles on the floor beside the bed, close enough that you can reach down to scratch its ears. Through the window, you can see the rain still falling, steady and silver in the lamplight from the street below. Tomorrow you'll continue west, deeper into the mountains, but tonight you're dry and warm and safe. Sleep comes easily, accompanied by the sound of rain and the distant murmur of voices from the common room below. You wake to silence and sunlight. The rain has passed in the night, leaving the world washed clean and bright. Through the window, you can see blue sky scattered with white clouds, and the street below is already busy with morning activity. The dog stretches beside the bed, yawning wide enough to show every tooth, then pads to the door and looks back at you expectantly. Time to move. Downstairs, the common room smells of porridge and bacon. You take breakfast at the same table as last night, thick oats sweetened with honey, strips of crisp bacon, and fresh bread with butter. The dog receives a bowl of scraps from the kitchen, delivered by the same serving girl who smiled at your secret feeding last night. She kneels to scratch the dog's ears, and it leans into her touch with obvious pleasure. "Safe travels," she says as you prepare to leave, and the words feel like a blessing. The town looks different in morning light. What seems sombre in the rain now shows its true character. A working settlement carved from the forest, practical and enduring. You stop at a general store to replenish supplies, exchanging coins for dried meat, hard cheese, flat bread, and a small sack of dried fruit. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman with sharp eyes and gentle hands, adds a packet of honey candy without being asked. "For the road," she says, "spring's a good time for travelling, but it's still a long way to anywhere from here." You leave Falkreath by the western road, the dog ranging ahead with renewed energy after a night indoors. The path climbs steadily, leaving the town behind as it enters the mountains that mark the border with the Reach. The forest here is mixed, pine and fir, but also aspen beginning to leaf out in brilliant green, and mountain ash showing clusters of white flowers. The air smells of growth and possibility, that particular scent of spring taking hold in earnest. The road follows a river valley, the water running high and fast with snowmelt from the peaks above. The sound of it is constant, a rushing presence that speaks of distance and depth. You cross several wooden bridges, their timbers dark with moisture, and each time you pause to watch the water tumble over rocks worn smooth by centuries of flow. Trout flash silver in the deeper pools, and once you see a beaver swimming determinedly upstream, a branch clasped in its teeth, intent on some project only it understands. By midday you've climbed high enough that the character of the forest changes. The trees grow more scattered, with open areas of meadow grass and wildflowers. The flowers are everywhere now. Purple lupine, yellow buttercups, white mountain avens, and delicate columbines in shades of pink and blue. Bees work the blooms with industrious purpose, and butterflies drift on the warm air, yellow and orange and white, their wings catching sunlight as they flutter from flower to flower. The dog bounds through the meadow, sending up clouds of pollen, sneezing occasionally, but undeterred. You stop to rest beside a spring that emerges from between rocks, its water so cold it makes your teeth ache. The dog drinks deeply, then flops down in the shade of a boulder, panting. You sit beside it, sharing the honey candy the shopkeeper gave you. The sweetness bursts across your tongue, and you close your eyes, letting the sun warm your face. A marmot whistles from somewhere upslope, the sound sharp and carrying. Another answers from a different direction. You open your eyes to see one sitting upright on a rock, watching you with bright, curious eyes. When you don't move, it goes back to grooming itself, completely unconcerned. The afternoon brings you higher still, into country where snow still lingers in shaded hollows, and the air carries a sharper chill. The peaks rise on either side now, their upper slopes still white, their faces showing the bare rock beneath. A waterfall tumbles down a cliff face in the distance, its roar faint but persistent. Eagles circle overhead, riding thermals up the mountain faces, and once you see a mountain goat on a seemingly impossible ledge, moving with casual confidence across terrain that would mean death for anything less sure-footed. The path narrows as it follows the river through a gorge. Rock walls rise on either side, streaked with mineral colours, rust red, yellow ochre, green copper stains. The river below has cut deep into the stone, creating pools and cascades. The sound is tremendous here, echoing off the walls, making conversation impossible even if you had someone to talk to. The dog presses close, unnerved by the noise and the narrow path. You place a reassuring hand on its head, and together you navigate the gorge carefully, one step at a time. Beyond the gorge, the valley opens again into a high alpine basin. The river here spreads wide and shallow, braiding through gravel bars and grassy islands. The mountains cup the basin on three sides, and straight ahead to the west, you can see where the valley narrows again, marking the route forward into the reach. But there are still hours of daylight left, and this basin feels like a good place to spend the afternoon. You find a spot on a gravel bar beside the river and simply sit, letting the day unfold around you. The dog explores the riverbank, investigating scents and occasionally barking at something you can't see. Clouds build over the peaks, their shadows racing across the valley floor. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of snow and stone and distance. A raven lands nearby, cocking its head to examine you with one bright eye. You break off a piece of bread and toss it toward the bird. It hops closer, snatches the bread, and flies off with its prize, calling hoarsely. As the sun begins to lower, painting the western peaks in shades of gold and pink, you make camp on the grassy slope above the river. Driftwood is plentiful along the banks, dried by sun and wind, and your fire catches quickly. You prepare a more elaborate meal than usual, flatbread warmed by the fire, cheese melted on top, dried meat rehydrated in boiled water with wild onion you found growing nearby. The dog receives its share and settles close to the fire, groaning contentedly as it stretches out. The evening is long and slow. The sky goes through its gradual transformation, blue to gold, to pink to purple, to deep indigo. Stars emerge one by one, then all at once, until the sky is brilliant with them. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a river of light. and you can see why the ancients called it the Path of Souls. The mountains around you fade to black silhouettes, but their presence is still felt, solid and eternal. The river's voice is a constant companion, and occasionally you hear the yip of a coyote from somewhere in the darkness, wild and free. You lie in your bedroll with the dog pressed against your back, a warm presence in the mountain night. The air is cold enough to see your breath, but the fire is strong and your blankets are thick. You think about the distance you've travelled, from Riften's canals to these high wild places, and the distance still to come. But mostly you think about nothing at all, content to simply exist in this moment, under these stars, beside this river, with this companion who chose to follow you. Sleep comes wrapped in the sound of water and wind, deep and dreamless and good. The cold wakes you before the sun. Frost has settled overnight, turning the world white and crystalline. Your breath clouds in the air, and the dog is pressed so tightly against you that you can feel its heart beating through the blankets. The fire has burned down to ash, but when you stir the embers, a few coals still glow red beneath. You add kindling carefully, coaxing flame back to life, and hold your hands over the small warmth as it grows. The sun rises behind the eastern peaks, flooding the basin with light that turns the frost to diamonds. Everything sparkles. The grass, the rocks, even the dog's fur where moisture has collected overnight. You boil water for tea, using herbs you gathered days ago in the lowlands, and wrap your hands around the warm cup while you wait for the world to thaw. The dog sits beside you, pressed against your leg, and you share the last of the honey candy, its sweetness a small comfort in the mountain morning. By the time you break camp, the frost has melted, and the day promises to be clear and bright. You follow the river west, watching as the valley narrows and the path begins to climb again. The vegetation changes as you ascend. Fewer trees now, mostly scrub juniper and low bushes, with expanses of mountain grass and wildflowers filling the spaces between. The air grows thinner, and you feel it in your lungs, in the way your breath comes quicker with effort. The path switchbacks up a steep slope, gaining elevation rapidly. You climb steadily, pausing occasionally to look back at the basin below, watching it shrink and flatten as you rise. The dog struggles a bit with the altitude, stopping more frequently to pant, and you adjust your pace to match its comfort. There's no hurry. The mountain will still be here, whether you climb it fast or slow. Near midday, you crest a high pass. The view stops you in your tracks. Behind lies all the country you've crossed, spread out like a map, forest and meadow and distant peaks fading into blue haze. Ahead lies something entirely new, the Reach, wild and broken, a landscape of dramatic cliffs and deep valleys, of stone and sky, with only scattered patches of green clinging to the steep terrain. It looks harsh and beautiful in equal measure, a place that demands respect. A cairn marks the high point of the pass, built from stones left by countless travellers. You add your own, feeling the smooth weight of it settle into place, then stand for a long moment just breathing, just looking. The wind up here is constant and strong, carrying the cries of birds you can't see, and the smell of snow from the peaks that rise even higher on either side. The dog presses against your leg, and you rest your hand on its head, grateful for the company, for the reminder that you're not alone in this vast landscape. The descent on the western side is steeper than the climb. The path is rougher here, less maintained, picking its way down through scree and broken rock. You move carefully, testing each step, mindful of loose stones that could shift underfoot. The dog picks its way down with surprising grace, finding routes that sometimes seem better than the path itself. Once, A rock shifts under your boot, and you catch yourself with your hands, scraping palms on rough stone. You sit for a moment, breathing through the quick spike of adrenaline, then continue more carefully. By mid-afternoon, you've descended into a narrow valley where a stream runs through tumbled boulders. Twisted pines grow from cracks in the rock, their roots exposed and gnarled, clinging with improbable tenacity. The air here is still, protected from the wind above, and noticeably warmer. You find a pool where the stream has carved a basin in the stone, and you kneel to wash the scrapes on your hands. The water is cold and clean, and though the cuts sting, they're shallow. The dog drinks from the pool, then wades in up to its belly, standing in the current with obvious pleasure. The valley walls are striped with colour, red and orange and yellow stone, layered like the pages of some immense book. You follow the stream downward, and with each bend the valley widens slightly, allowing more vegetation. Willows appear, their new leaves bright green, and patches of grass grow thick near the water. Birds flit among the branches, warblers and finches, their songs cheerful and busy. The dog startles a grouse from cover, and it explodes into flight with a thunder of wings, making you both jump. As the sun lowers, you emerge from the valley into more open country. The stream joins a larger river, and beside it runs a proper road, wide enough for wagons. You can see wheel ruts in the dried mud and the marks of horses' hooves. Following this road north will eventually lead to Dragon Bridge and the route to Solitude, but that's still days away. For now, you're grateful simply to be on easier terrain after the mountain crossing. You find a sheltered spot where the river bends, forming a small beach of smooth stones. Driftwood is piled against the bank, left by spring floods, already dried and perfect for burning. You build a fire as the light fades, arranging the wood carefully to maximize heat. The dog helps by bringing sticks, dropping them at your feet with a wagging tail, though most are too small or too green to be useful. You accept them anyway, praising the effort, and the dog seems pleased with itself. Dinner is simple, but feels like a feast after the long day. Dried meat softened in boiling water, flatbread, cheese that's begun to soften in the warmer weather, but still tastes good. You eat slowly, watching the river flow past, its surface catching the last light of day. A fish jumps somewhere upstream, the splash audible in the quiet. An owl calls from the willows, and another answers from across the river. The sound is neither lonely nor frightening, simply part of the evening's fabric. The stars emerge as you tend the fire, adding wood to keep it burning through the night. The constellations are the same ones you've watched since leaving Riften, but they seem different here, seen from this wild country. The warrior stands bold in the southern sky, and the serpent winds between lesser stars. You point them out to the dog, who watches your pointing finger with interest, but probably doesn't care about astronomy. Still, it's comforting to speak aloud, to hear your own voice after days of silence. You settle into your bedroll as the fire burns low. The dog curls against your side, already asleep, its breathing deep and even. The river's voice is different from the mountain streams. Deeper, steadier, the sound of water that knows where it's going and takes its time getting there. You close your eyes and let that sound carry you down into sleep, feeling the miles of the day in your muscles, the satisfaction of distance covered and challenges met. Tomorrow will bring new country, new sights, but tonight you're exactly where you need to be. Morning arrives with birdsong and the soft light of early spring. You wake to find the dog already awake, sitting at the river's edge watching the water flow past. When you stir, it turns and trots back to camp, tail wagging, ready for whatever the day might bring. The fire has burned to ash, but the morning is mild enough that you don't bother rebuilding it. You eat a cold breakfast of bread and dried fruit, drink deeply from your water skin refilled with river water, and shoulder your pack as the sun climbs above the eastern hills. The road follows the river north, through country that grows gradually less severe. The cliffs and broken stone of the high reach give way to rolling hills covered in tough grass and scattered juniper. Here and there you pass ancient standing stones, their surfaces carved with symbols worn smooth by wind and time. No one knows who raised them or what they meant, but they feel significant, markers of some old purpose that outlasted the people who carved them. You touch one as you pass, feeling the stone warm under morning sun, and wonder about the hands that shaped it. By mid-morning, you begin to see signs of habitation. A distant farmstead tucked into a fold of hills, smoke rising from its chimney. Fields carved from the rough land, their soil dark and rich where it's been turned. A shepherd with a small flock of sheep on a hillside, his dog running the perimeter while he leans on his staff. He raises a hand in greeting as you pass, and you return the gesture. Your own dog watches the sheep with interest, but stays close, perhaps sensing that chasing them would be unwelcome. The road improves as you continue north, the surface more packed, the drainage better maintained. You pass a milestone marker, its inscription barely legible. Dragon Bridge, 8 miles. The name brings a small surge of anticipation. Dragon Bridge is a proper settlement, with an inn and supplies, a place to rest before the final push north to Solitude. 8 miles is an easy afternoon's walk, but you don't hurry. The day is pleasant and there's no reason to rush through it. You stop for lunch beside a small tributary that feeds into the main river. The water here runs clear over a bed of coloured stones, white and grey and rust red, smooth as eggs. You wade in up to your ankles, letting the current push against your legs, feeling the cold work its way into your bones. The dog splashes beside you, snapping at the water as though it's something that can be caught. You laugh at its antics, and the sound surprises you. You haven't laughed aloud in days. The dog looks pleased with itself, tail wagging furiously. After drying your feet and pulling your boots back on, you follow the tributary upstream for a short distance, leaving the main road. Something about the sound of the water draws you, and you trust the impulse. Around a bend, you find a small waterfall pouring over a lip of stone into a pool surrounded by ferns. The moss here is thick and impossibly green, and tiny white flowers, you think they might be wood anemones, grow in clusters among the rocks. It's a hidden place, the kind that might go unnoticed by travellers who stick to the road, and you feel privileged to have found it. You sit on a flat rock beside the pool, simply being still, letting the place settle around you. A dragonfly hovers over the water, its body a brilliant metallic blue. A frog sits half submerged at the pool's edge, eyes bulging, throat pulsing slowly. Time feels different here, slower, as though this small sheltered place exists slightly apart from the world's normal flow. The dog lies down beside you with a contented sigh, and together you rest in the dappled shade, listening to water and bird song and the quiet breathing of growing things. When you finally return to the main road, the sun has passed its peak and begun its afternoon descent. The walking is easy now, the road wide and level, following the river valley north. You pass more farms, more signs of settled life, a mill with its wheel turning steadily in the current, children playing in a yard who stop to stare as you pass, a woman hanging laundry who calls out a cheerful greeting. The wildness of the high mountains feels distant here, replaced by the comfortable domesticity of worked land and human voices. Late in the afternoon, you round a bend and see Dragon Bridge ahead. The town takes its name from the ancient stone bridge that spans the river, a massive structure built in the shape of a dragon's head, its mouth open to form the arch through which the water flows. No one knows who built it or when, but it stood for longer than anyone can remember. Stone scales still visible on its surface, eyes carved deep and watchful. You cross it slowly, running your hand along the worn stone, feeling the craftsmanship of builders long dead. The town beyond is modest but prosperous, built on both sides of the river. Buildings of stone and timber line narrow streets, and the smell of cooking fires and fresh bread drifts on the air. You make your way to the inn, the Four Shields, according to the sign, and push open the door to warmth and noise. The innkeeper, a Breton woman with grey hair pulled back severely, looks you over with a practised eye, notes the dog at your side, and quotes a price. You pay without haggling, too tired to care about saving a few coins. The room is clean and simple, with a real bed and a window that overlooks the bridge. You drop your pack gratefully and sit on the edge of the bed, feeling the miles of the day settling into your bones. The dog explores the small space, sniffing corners and testing the rug with its paws, then comes to rest its head on your knee. You scratch behind its ears, and it closes its eyes in pleasure. "Good dog," you murmur. "Good, loyal dog." Its tail thumps once against the floor. Downstairs, the common room serves a hearty dinner. Roasted chicken with root vegetables, fresh bread with butter, and a berry tart that tastes of summer despite the early season. You eat at a table near the window, watching the evening light fade over the river and the ancient bridge. Other travellers occupy nearby tables, their conversations washing over you in comfortable anonymity. No one asks where you're from or where you're going. On the road, everyone has their own journey, their own reasons. After dinner, you step outside into the cool evening. The sky is clear, stars beginning to emerge, and the river rushes beneath the Dragon Bridge with its constant voice. You walk partway across, leaning on the stone rail to watch the water flow past. The dog sits beside you, patient and quiet. Tomorrow you'll continue north, following the last stretch of road to Solitude. But tonight, you're content to stand here, in this in-between place, neither where you were nor where you're going, suspended in the present moment like the stone dragon suspended over flowing water. Eventually, you return to the inn, climb the stairs to your room, and fall into bed with the dog curled on the rug beside you. Sleep comes quickly, deep and dreamless, your body grateful for softness after so many nights on hard ground. You wake to the sound of the river and early morning voices from the street below. Sunlight streams through the window, warming the wooden floorboards. The dog is already at the door, shifting its weight from paw to paw, eager to be outside. You dress quickly and follow it down to the common room, where the smell of porridge and fried bacon makes your stomach growl with sudden hunger. Breakfast is generous. Thick oats with cream and honey, eggs scrambled with wild onions, bread toasted over the fire until it's golden and crisp. The innkeeper's daughter brings a plate of scraps for the dog without being asked, and it eats with enthusiasm while you nurse a cup of strong tea and plan the day ahead. The road to Solitude follows the river north for another day, maybe two, depending on pace. You're in no hurry. The journey has become its own destination, each day unfolding with its own small discoveries and quiet pleasures. You leave Dragon Bridge as the morning mist is lifting from the river. The town wakes slowly behind you, shutters opening, smoke beginning to rise from chimneys. the sound of a blacksmith's hammer already ringing out in steady rhythm. The road is well travelled here, wide enough for 2 carts to pass, the surface packed hard by years of trade and traffic. The dog ranges ahead, then circles back, then ranges ahead again, full of energy after a night indoors and a good breakfast. The landscape continues to gentle as you travel north. The dramatic peaks and wild country of the Reach soften into rolling hills covered with pine and fir. Small farms appear more frequently, their fields green with spring crops, their pastures dotted with cattle and sheep. You pass a man ploughing behind an ox, the furrows turning dark and rich behind the blade. He pauses to wipe his brow and watches you pass, raising his hand in greeting. The gesture feels warm, neighbourly, a reminder that even on the long road you're never entirely separate from the human world. By midday you've reached a place where the river widens and slows, creating a broad, calm stretch of water. Willows grow thick along the banks, their branches trailing in the current, new leaves brilliant green in the sunlight. You stop here to rest, sitting on a fallen log that's been stripped of bark and smoothed by weather. The dog wades into the shallows, drinking deeply, then lies down in the water to cool its belly. You smile at the picture it makes, muddy and content, tongue lolling, eyes half closed in pleasure. You eat lunch slowly, watching the river flow past. A family of ducks paddles by, the ducklings still small and fluffy, staying close to their mother. Dragonflies hover and dart over the water's surface, their wings catching light in flashes of blue and green. Somewhere in the willows, a songbird practices its repertoire, elaborate trills and whistles that seem impossibly complex for such a small creature. The moment feels suspended, perfect in its ordinariness, and you commit it to memory, knowing that when you reach Solitude and whatever awaits you there, you'll want to remember this: the river, the willows, the dog cooling itself in the shallows, the patient unfolding of a spring afternoon. When you continue, the road climbs slightly, rising above the river to follow higher ground. The view from here stretches for miles, the river winding through its valley, the patchwork of farms and forest, and far to the north, barely visible through the haze, the first suggestion of the sea. Your heart quickens slightly at the sight. The sea means Solitude is close, the end of this long walk from Riften finally within reach. But the feeling is complicated, anticipation mixed with something like reluctance. The journey has been good. You're not sure you're ready for it to end. The afternoon brings you through a stretch of forest where the pines grow tall and the air smells of resin and earth. The road here is shaded and cool, a relief after the midday sun. You pass a shrine to Kinnereth, goddess of the heavens and wind, its stone altar covered with offerings. Feathers, carved wooden birds, wildflowers beginning to wilt. You add a sprig of lavender from your pack, placing it carefully among the other gifts. The dog sits patiently while you stand with your eyes closed for a moment, not exactly praying but acknowledging something larger than yourself, the forces that govern wind and weather and safe travel. Beyond the shrine you encounter another traveller, the first person you've met actually on the road, rather than in towns or passing farmsteads. She's an elderly Nord woman leading a pony laden with packs. She stops when she sees you, leaning on a walking stick, and you exchange greetings. Her voice is hoarse but friendly, and she tells you she's heading south to visit a daughter in Dragonbridge. You tell her you're bound for Solitude, and she nods as though this is both expected and entirely reasonable. You're close now, she says. Another day, maybe less if you keep a good pace. The road's easy from here. You'll smell the sea before you see it. She reaches down to scratch the dog's ears, Good travelling companion, she observes, and you agree. After a few more pleasantries, you each continue on your way. She south toward her daughter, you north toward the sea. The day wanes slowly, the light taking on that particular golden quality of late afternoon. You pass through a small hamlet, barely more than a few houses and a general store, and stop to replenish your dwindling supplies. The shopkeeper, a young woman with a baby on her hip, sells you bread, cheese, smoked fish, and apples so crisp they snap when you bite them. She makes a fuss over the dog, and the baby reaches out to touch its fur with chubby fingers. The dog tolerates the attention with patient dignity, and when you leave, the woman calls after you, "Fair winds to Solitude." As evening approaches, you leave the road to make camp in a grove of aspens beside a small stream. The trees are young here, their bark white and smooth, their leaves trembling in the slightest breeze with the sound that gives them their name. Quaking. You build your fire in a ring of stones that shows others have camped here before, and soon the flames are crackling cheerfully, pushing back the gathering dusk. You prepare dinner with care, knowing these might be your last nights sleeping under stars for a while. The smoked fish cooks quickly over the flames, its skin crisping and its flesh flaking into tender pieces. You eat it with fresh bread and cheese, and share generously with the dog, who has earned its portion and more. After eating, you lie back on your bedroll while it's still early, watching the sky through the aspen leaves. The leaves move constantly, never quite still, creating patterns of light and shadow that shift and flow like water. The stars emerge slowly, as they always do, patient and inevitable. You find the constellations you've watched throughout your journey, tracing their patterns with your eyes. The steed, the lover, the warrior, all there, all constant, all indifferent to the small human concerns below, but there's comfort in that indifference, in knowing that the stars will keep their courses regardless of what happens in Solitude or anywhere else. The dog presses against your side, warm and solid and real, and you rest your hand on its rough fur. Tomorrow will bring you closer to journey's end, but tonight you're here, under aspens, beside a stream, with the simple comfort of fire and food and companionship. It's enough. It's more than enough. Morning breaks with a chill that suggests the sea is near. The air tastes different, salt and brine mixed with the familiar sense of forest and earth. You wake to find the dog already up, nose lifted to the wind, testing this new smell with obvious interest. The fire has died completely, leaving only cold ash, and for once you don't bother to revive it. Today feels like a day for moving, for covering the last miles to Solitude, while energy and anticipation both run high. You pack quickly, eating a simple breakfast of bread and apple while standing, washing it down with cold water from the stream. The aspen leaves catch the early light, turning golden green and trembling in the morning breeze. A woodpecker hammers somewhere nearby, the sound sharp and purposeful. You shoulder your pack, call softly to the dog, and return to the road as the sun breaks above the eastern hills. The landscape shifts as you travel north. The forest thins, giving way to more open country. Rocky outcrops covered in lichen, meadows of tough coastal grass, and twisted pines shaped by constant wind from the sea. The air grows cooler, and you can hear it now, distant but unmistakable. The sound of waves against shore, that rhythmic crash and withdraw that's older than mountains. The dog's ears prick forward, and it quickens its pace, pulling ahead as though eager to investigate this new thing. By mid-morning, you crest a rise, and there it is. The sea of ghosts, spread before you like hammered silver stretching to the horizon. The sight stops you in your tracks. After weeks of forest and mountain, river and meadow, this vast expanse of water feels impossible, too large to comprehend. The surface moves constantly, waves catching light and throwing it back in 1,000 shifting patterns. Far out you can see whitecaps where the wind pushes harder, and closer in, the water rolls against rocky shores in endless patience. The road curves down toward the coast, and you follow it eagerly now, drawn by the newness of this landscape. Seabirds wheel overhead, gulls crying their harsh calls, cormorants flying low over the waves in tight formations. The smell of salt is strong here, mixed with seaweed and the particular scent of tidal pools exposed by low water. The dog races ahead, barking at the waves when they crash against rocks, then retreating when the water reaches for its paws. You laugh at its caution and curiosity both. You find a path that leads down to the shore and take it, wanting to stand at the water's edge, to feel the sea beneath your feet. The beach is rocky rather than sandy, covered with smooth stones in shades of grey and white and rust. Tide pools dot the exposed areas, each one a small world. Anemones waving tentacles, small crabs scuttling sideways, seaweed in shades of green and brown, swaying gently in the trapped water. You kneel beside one, peering in, fascinated by this glimpse of a life so different from the forests and mountains you've been travelling through. The dog splashes into the shallows, then immediately retreats, shaking itself vigorously. The salt water clearly tastes wrong, and it looks at you with an expression of betrayal, as though you should have warned it. You laugh again and call it back, scratching behind its ears in apology. Together you walk along the shore, the waves rushing in and pulling back, leaving lines of foam and small treasures, shells, polished glass worn smooth by the sea, pieces of driftwood carved into strange shapes by salt and time. After an hour exploring the shore, you reluctantly return to the road. Solitude is close now. You can feel it in the increasing signs of habitation, the wider road, the occasional traveller heading south. The path climbs slightly, following the coastline north, and with each turn you expect to see the city. But Solitude holds back, hidden behind headlands and the curve of the shore, keeping its secrets a little longer. By early afternoon, you round a bend and there it is, Solitude, perched on its great stone arch above the sea. The city rises in tiers, built from grey stone that seems to grow from the rocky cliffs beneath it. The famous arch spans an impossible distance, and you can see the waves crashing through far below, white foam against dark rock. Buildings climb toward the sky, towers and walls, the bulk of the castle at the highest point, and everywhere the blue banners of Harfingar snapping in the constant wind. The sight is magnificent and slightly overwhelming after so many days in the wilderness. The road approaches from the south, following the coast before turning inland toward the city gates. You walk it slowly, taking in the details, the lighthouse on a distant promontory, the docks visible below where ships are moored, the sturdy walls that have defended this place for centuries. The dog stays close now, perhaps sensing your change in mood, the way anticipation has mixed with uncertainty. This is where you've been heading, but now that you're here, you're not entirely sure what comes next. You pass through outlying areas, a mill, a stable, a cluster of houses built in the city's shadow. People are everywhere now, going about their business with the purposeful urgency of city dwellers. After the quiet of the road, the noise feels almost jarring. Voices, cartwheels, hammers, the cry of vendors, the clatter of horses' hooves on stone. The dog presses against your leg, and you rest your hand on its head, as much for your own comfort as for its. The road leads to a gate in the outer wall, manned by guards in the distinctive armour of Solitude. Blue and silver, well maintained, the marks of professional soldiers rather than town militia. They look you over as you approach, taking in your travel-worn clothes, your pack, the dog at your side. One of them asks your business in Solitude, the question routine but still requiring an answer. You give one, vague enough to be true, specific enough to satisfy. The guard nods and waves you through without further questions. You pass under the gate and into the city proper. The streets are paved with cobblestones, rising in steep grades toward the heights where the castle stands. Buildings crowd close on either side, stone and timber, their walls decorated with carvings, their windows showing signs of wealth and permanence. The smell of the city washes over you, cooking food, animals, smoke, the sea breeze carrying it all together. It's so different from the forest silence, the mountain air, the quiet camps beside rivers and streams. You make your way up the main street, moving with the flow of foot traffic. The dog stays very close now, overwhelmed by the noise and movement. You find an inn, the Winking Skeever, according to the painted sign, and push open the door. Inside it's warm and loud, full of voices and laughter and the smell of roasting meat. A fire roars in a large hearth and tables crowd the common room. You make your way to the bar, where the innkeeper, a Nord man with elaborate tattoos on his arms, greets you with professional cheer. You arrange for a room, paying for 2 nights, though you're not sure yet how long you'll stay. The innkeeper barely glances at the dog, clearly used to travellers with animal companions. A serving boy shows you upstairs to a small room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. You drop your pack with relief, feeling the weight lift from your shoulders literally and figuratively. The dog immediately claims the rug, circling 3 times before lying down with a heavy sigh. You stand at the window, looking out over the city you've spent weeks walking toward. The journey from Riften feels both impossibly long and strangely brief. All those days and miles compressed into memory, already taking on the quality of something that happened long ago. Your reflection in the glass shows someone weathered by sun and wind, leaner than when you left, eyes different somehow. The road changes people. You've known this, but feeling it is different from knowing it. Below, the city continues its evening rhythms. People heading home, shops closing, the sound of voices raised in argument or laughter or simple conversation. Somewhere in the distance you hear music, a flute playing a melody you don't recognize. The dog snores softly on the rug. You wash your face and hands in the basin, the water cold but clean, and watch the light fade from the sky. Tomorrow you'll explore Solitude properly, discover its streets and markets and hidden corners. But tonight, you're content to rest here, in this room above the city, at the end of a long journey, with a faithful companion asleep at your feet and the sound of the sea distant but constant beyond the walls. You wake to the sound of gulls crying outside your window. The dog is already awake, sitting by the door with its tail sweeping the floor in slow arcs. Morning light filters through the glass, softer than the harsh brightness of mountain mornings, diffused by the sea mist that clings to Solitude in the early hours. You dress slowly, feeling the stiffness in your muscles, not from yesterday's walk, but from sleeping in a real bed after so many nights on the ground. Your body has grown accustomed to earth and stone, and the softness feels strange now, almost decadent. Downstairs, the common room is already busy with breakfast. You find a table near the window and order porridge with cream, fresh bread, and smoked fish that tastes of the sea. The dog receives a bowl of scraps and settles at your feet, content to watch the room with mild interest. Around you, conversation flows, merchants discussing prices, sailors complaining about weather, locals sharing gossip about people you don't know. It's the comfortable noise of a city waking, and you let it wash over you without trying to follow individual threads. After breakfast, you step out into solitude proper. The morning is cool and grey, the sun hidden behind clouds that promise rain later. The streets are already crowded, people heading to market, children being herded towards some destination, a pair of guards making their rounds. You let the flow of foot traffic carry you upward, following the main street as it climbs toward the castle district. The dog stays close, occasionally pressed against your leg when the crowd thickens. The architecture here speaks of age and wealth. Buildings 3 and 4 stories tall, their facades carved with elaborate designs, windows fitted with real glass rather than oiled parchment. You pass a plaza where a fountain plays, water arcing from the mouth of a stone wolf into a circular basin. Pigeons cluster around its edge, and a few bold ones bathe in the shallow water. The dog watches them with interest but doesn't chase, perhaps finally learning that not everything that moves needs pursuing. You wander without specific destination, simply absorbing the city. A bakery fills the street with the smell of fresh bread and sweet pastries. A smithy rings with the sound of hammer on anvil, sparks visible through the open door. You pass a shop selling fabrics, silks and velvets in colours you haven't seen in weeks, deep crimsons and royal blues and forest greens. The shopkeeper stands in the doorway, calling out to passers-by, her voice cheerful and practiced. The street opens into a larger square dominated by a building you recognise from descriptions. The Bard's College, its walls ancient stone, its windows tall and filled with coloured glass that catches what little light breaks through the clouds. You can hear music from within, voices raised in harmony, the sound of a lute being tuned, someone practicing scales on what might be a flute. The music draws you, and you stand for a moment just listening, feeling something in your chest loosen at the beauty of it. Near the college you find a small garden tucked between buildings. It's clearly tended with care, flower beds showing the first blooms of spring, benches placed to catch whatever sun manages to break through, a small tree just beginning to leaf out. An elderly woman sits on one bench, feeding breadcrumbs to the birds that cluster at her feet. She looks up as you enter, her face creasing into a smile. "Beautiful morning," she says, though the sky is grey and threatening rain. You agree because in a way she's right. There's beauty in the garden, in the birds, in the simple act of sitting peacefully in a quiet space while the city bustles beyond the walls. You sit on another bench, and the dog lies at your feet with a contented sigh. The woman continues feeding her birds, humming softly to herself. For a long moment, you simply exist in this pocket of calm, feeling the journey settling into your bones, becoming memory rather than present experience. You've arrived. The goal you set weeks ago in Riften, to reach solitude, to walk the distance, to see what lay between, has been achieved. The feeling should be triumphant, but instead it's quieter than that, more like satisfaction, like the completion of something that needed doing. When you leave the garden, the first drops of rain are beginning to fall. You pull up your hood, and the dog shakes its head at the moisture. Together you navigate the streets, no longer climbing but wandering laterally, exploring the warren of alleys and side streets that branch off from the main thoroughfares. Here, away from the grand facades, you find the real city, laundry hanging between buildings, children playing games in doorways, cats watching from windowsills, the smell of cooking emerging from open windows. You discover a small market tucked into a plaza, barely large enough to hold a dozen stalls. Vendors sell vegetables, fresh fish, cheese, bread, and flowers. Spring blooms in buckets of water, their colours bright against the grey day. A woman sells honey from wooden combs, the golden liquid thick and slow. You buy a small jar, and she wraps it carefully in cloth, warning you to keep it upright. The transaction is simple, but feels significant somehow, a piece of this place to carry forward. The rain intensifies, and you duck into a covered arcade that runs along one side of a building. Others have had the same idea, and you stand among them, watching the rain fall in sheets across the plaza. The dog shakes itself, spraying water, and earns a few annoyed looks from those standing nearby. You apologise and move to the edge of the arcade, giving others space. The rain drums on the roof above, and the air smells clean and fresh, washed of the city's usual scents. When the rain eases to a drizzle, you continue your exploration. You find steps that lead down toward the docks, carved into the rock itself, steep and slick with moisture. You descend carefully, one hand on the wall, the dog picking its way down with the caution of an animal that doesn't like heights. At the bottom, the docks spread along the shore, wooden piers stretching into the water, ships moored with ropes as thick as your arm, the smell of fish and tar and salt water overwhelming. Sailors move about their tasks, calling to each other in voices roughened by wind and sea spray. Crates are being loaded onto one ship, unloaded from another. A fisherman guts his catch at the pier's edge, tossing entrails into the water where gulls swoop and fight over them. The scene is busy and purposeful, everyone absorbed in their work. You watch for a while, fascinated by this world you know nothing about, these people whose lives revolve around the sea and its moods. The dog finds something foul-smelling to roll in, and you pull it away with a scolding that lacks real anger. Together you climb back up the long stairs, breathing hard by the time you reach the top. The exercise feels good after days of level walking, your legs remembering the mountains, the effort of climbing. By afternoon the rain has stopped, and weak sunlight breaks through the clouds. You find yourself back in the main streets, drawn by the smell of food from a tavern, the winking skeever again, you realise, having circled back without meaning to. You go inside and order lunch, a meat pie thick with gravy, roasted vegetables, dark bread, and ale that tastes of malt and autumn despite the spring season. You eat slowly, watching the room. A group of sailors at one table are arguing good-naturedly about the best route to somewhere called Dawnstar. Two women sit with their heads close together, conversation intense and private. An old man sleeps in a corner, his chin on his chest, a half-empty tankard before him. It's ordinary life, the kind that happens every day in every city, and after weeks on the road, it feels both familiar and strange. After lunch, you return to your room. The dog immediately claims its spot on the rug, and you sit on the bed, suddenly tired despite the relatively easy day. You think about the road behind you, Riften's canals, the forests of Falkreath, the high mountain passes, dragon bridges, ancient stone, and all the small moments between. The journey has changed you in ways you're still discovering, teaching lessons you haven't fully learned yet. Through the window, you can see Solitude continuing its daily rhythms, indifferent to your arrival or anyone else's. The city has been here long before you came and will remain long after you leave. There's comfort in that, in being part of something larger than yourself, a single thread in a tapestry too large to see in its entirety. You lie back on the bed, intending to rest just for a moment, and fall into deep sleep with the sounds of the city drifting through the window and the dog's gentle snoring rising from the floor below. You wake in the late afternoon to find the room filled with golden light. The clouds have cleared, and the sun is making a final appearance before evening. The dog stretches beside the bed, yawning wide, and looks at you with patient eyes. You've slept longer than intended, but your body clearly needed it. The accumulated tiredness of weeks on the road finally catching up now that you've stopped moving. You splash water on your face from the basin, feeling the coolness wake you fully. Through the window, the city glows in the warm light, and you can see the sea beyond, its surface turned to copper and gold. Something pulls at you, not restlessness exactly, but a desire to see more, to climb higher, to find the vantage point that will let you see Solitude whole before the day ends. Downstairs, you ask the innkeeper about reaching the upper levels of the city. He gives you directions with the casual efficiency of someone who's answered this question 1,000 times. Keep climbing, he says. Everything in Solitude goes up. You'll find your way. The advice is simple but proves accurate. You step back into the late afternoon and begin to climb. The streets grow steeper as you ascend, the buildings grander. You pass the Temple of the Divines, its doors open to reveal the soft glow of candles within. The sound of chanting drifts out, voices raised in prayer or song, the words indistinct but the melody ancient and somehow comforting. The dog's nails click on the cobblestones, and you continue upward, following the street as it switchbacks toward the heights. You reach a plaza near the castle gates, where the stone beneath your feet is worn smooth by centuries of traffic. Guards stand watch, but they barely glance at you. Just another visitor in a city that sees hundreds. Beyond the gates, you can glimpse the castle courtyard, but that's not where you're headed. Instead, you find a walkway that leads along the city's outer wall, open to the public, offering views of the sea and the land beyond. The walkway is narrow but sturdy, built into the wall itself. You follow it, one hand occasionally touching the stone for balance, the dog trotting ahead with surprising confidence given the height. The wall curves, following the natural contours of the rock arch beneath, and with each step the view expands. You can see the docks below, the ships moored there looking like toys from this height. The sea stretches endlessly, its surface still catching the evening light. And to the south, the direction from which you came, you can see the forests and hills rolling away into blue distance. You find a small alcove, a lookout point built into the wall, probably meant for guards but empty now. You settle onto the stone bench there, and the dog lies at your feet. Together you watch the sun sink lower, painting the world in shades of amber and rose. The wind is constant up here, carrying the salt smell of the sea and the distant cries of birds. Your hair whips around your face, and you pull it back, holding it with one hand while you simply look. From here, you can trace your journey in reverse. Somewhere south lies Dragon Bridge, and beyond that the Reach with its wild beauty. Further still, hidden by distance and haze, are the high passes you crossed, Falkreath's deep forests, and eventually Riften where this all began. Each place holds memories now, campsites and conversations, moments of beauty or challenge, the slow accumulation of miles that brought you here. The distance seems impossible, yet you walked every step of it. The dog shifts beside you, and you reach down to scratch behind its ears. It's been a constant companion since that day by the stream in Falkreath, following without question or complaint, content simply to be near you. You realise with a pang that you've never properly named it, always just calling it dog or friend. The realization feels like a failure of some kind, but perhaps it doesn't matter. The dog doesn't seem concerned with names, only with presence and food and the simple comfort of companionship. The sun touches the horizon and the sky ignites, streaks of orange and pink and purple spreading across the western sky. The sea reflects it all, doubling the display, making it seem as though the world is on fire in the most beautiful way possible. Other people have found their way to the wall now, drawn by the sunset. They stand in small groups or alone, all watching the same sky, all briefly united in appreciation of beauty that costs nothing and belongs to everyone. As the light fades, you notice details you missed before. The way the waves catch the last rays, turning white foam to gold. The silhouette of a ship leaving harbour, its sails filling with wind as it heads for open water. Birds returning to roost, dark shapes against the colourful sky. A lighthouse far down the coast beginning its nightly work, its beams sweeping across the darkening sea. Each element seems precisely placed, as though the world has arranged itself just so for this moment. The colours fade gradually, the sky moving through darker shades of purple and blue toward true night. The first stars appear, familiar constellations emerging one by one. The warrior, the thief, the steed, the same stars you watched from campsites along the road, now seen from this high vantage point above the sea. They're constant in a world of change, and there's deep comfort in that. You remain on the wall as night settles fully. The city below comes alive with lights, windows glowing warm yellow, lanterns lit along the streets, torches burning at gates and doorways. From up here, it looks like a mirror of the stars, the city reflecting the sky, or the sky reflecting the city, and for a moment you can't tell which is which. The sea disappears into darkness, its presence marked only by sound. The constant rush of waves against rock far below. Eventually the cold drives you to move. You stand stiffly, muscles protesting after sitting so long, and call softly to the dog. Together you make your way back along the wall, descending toward the warmth and light of the inn. The streets are quieter now, most people home for their evening meals. You pass a tavern where someone is playing a drum, the rhythm spilling out into the night, and somewhere a woman laughs, the sound carrying clearly in the cold air. Back at the winking skeever, you order dinner in the common room. Fish stew thick with vegetables, bread to soak up the broth, and a glass of wine that tastes of berries and oak. The food is simple but good, warming you from inside. The dog receives its portion and eats with enthusiasm, then settles by your feet with a satisfied groan. You sit long after finishing your meal, watching the fire in the hearth, listening to the murmur of conversation around you. A bard is playing in the corner, just a man with a lute, singing old songs about heroes and lost loves and the sea. His voice is pleasant but not remarkable, and somehow that makes it better, more real. This isn't a performance for nobility or a grand occasion, just a man sharing songs because songs need sharing. When you finally climb the stairs to your room, you feel the satisfying tiredness of a full day lived well. The dog follows, its nails clicking on the wooden steps. In the room, you open the window slightly, letting in the cool night air and the distant sound of the sea. You lie in bed, the dog curled on its rug, and think about tomorrow. There are things you came to Solitude to do, reasons for the journey that wait to be addressed. But tonight you're content to simply have arrived, to have walked the distance, to have proven to yourself that such journeys are possible. Sleep comes gently, carried on the sound of waves and the quiet breathing of a loyal companion. Morning arrives with the cry of gulls and the smell of baking bread from somewhere below. You wake feeling rested, truly rested, in a way you haven't since leaving Riften. The dog is already at the window, front paws on the sill, watching the street below with intent interest. When you join it, you see what's caught its attention. A cart loaded with fish passing by, its contents attracting every cat and dog in the vicinity. The dog whines softly but doesn't bark, having learned some city manners during your stay. You dress and head downstairs, where breakfast is already being served. The common room is less crowded this morning, and you choose a table near the hearth, where last night's coals still glow faintly. The meal is generous. Eggs cooked with herbs, thick slices of bacon, fresh bread with butter and jam that tastes of strawberries. The dog receives its portion, and you eat slowly, planning the day ahead. Today feels different from yesterday's wandering. You've seen the city's main streets and markets, climbed to the heights and watched the sunset. Now you want to discover the smaller places, the corners that visitors might miss. You want to know Solitude not as a destination, but as a place where people actually live, the quiet streets and hidden gardens, the shops that serve locals rather than travellers. You leave the inn and turn down a side street you haven't explored yet. It's narrow, barely wide enough for a cart, and climbs steeply between buildings whose upper stories nearly meet overhead. The cobblestones here are worn smooth, and moss grows in the cracks where water runs after rain. The dog investigates every doorway and corner, tail wagging with the joy of new scents and discoveries. The street opens into a small square built around an old well. The well is still in use. A woman is drawing water as you arrive, her bucket splashing as it breaks the surface far below. She nods a greeting and continues her work, the windlass creaking as she turns it. Potted plants sit on windowsills around the square, herbs mostly, their green leaves bright against grey stone. You can smell rosemary and thyme, and something else you can't quite identify, pungent and medicinal. Beyond the square you find a street of workshops and small businesses. A carpenter's shop displays his wares, chairs and tables, wooden bowls, carved figurines. The smell of fresh sawdust drifts from the open door. Next to it, a seamstress works at her window, needle flashing in the morning light. She looks up as you pass and smiles, the expression transforming her weathered face into something beautiful. You smile back and continue on. A narrow alley leads down toward the docks, but halfway along it branches into an even narrower passage. You follow it, curious, and discover a tiny courtyard hidden from the main streets. Someone has made a garden here, raised beds filled with vegetables just beginning to sprout, climbing vines on the walls showing the first unfurling leaves. A bench sits in one corner, weathered but solid. An elderly man tends the garden, moving slowly but with obvious care. He looks up as you enter, startled, then relaxes when he sees you mean no harm. "Didn't expect visitors," he says, his voice rough with age. "Most people don't know this place exists." You apologise for intruding, but he waves it away. "No harm in looking. Been keeping this garden 40 years, since before you were born likely." The city forgets about places like this, and that's how I prefer it. He returns to his work, pulling small weeds from between the vegetable shoots. You watch for a moment, fascinated by his gnarled hands working the soil with such gentle precision, then quietly leave him to his peace. You emerge from the alley onto a broader street and follow it upward again. The sun is climbing now, burning off the morning haze, and the day promises to be clear and warm. You pass a fountain where children are playing, their laughter high and bright. The dog watches them with interest, tail wagging, and one brave child approaches to pet it. "What's its name?" the child asks, and you realize again that you still haven't named your companion. "Traveller," you say, the word coming without thought. The child nods seriously, as though this is a very good name, and runs back to the game. Traveller. Yes, that fits. The dog, Traveller now, seems unconcerned with finally having a name, more interested in the bread crust the child dropped. You allow it this small treasure and continue walking. By midday, you've wandered far from the central areas, finding yourself in a residential district where houses crowd together on narrow streets. Laundry hangs between buildings, snapping in the breeze. A woman sings as she scrubs her doorstep, her voice carrying clearly in the relative quiet. Two men sit on a stoop playing dice, their conversation low and comfortable. This is solitude without pretense, without the grand facades and tourist-friendly markets. Just people living their lives in a city that's home rather than destination. You find a small bakery tucked into a corner, easy to miss if you weren't looking. Inside it's warm and smells of yeast and sugar. The baker, a stout Nord woman with flour on her apron, greets you with professional cheer. You buy a sweet roll still warm from the oven and a smaller one for Traveller, who accepts it delicately and carries it outside to eat on the steps. You sit beside the dog, eating your own roll slowly, watching the street's small dramas unfold. A child being scolded for muddy shoes. A cat stalking a bird. Two neighbours stopping to chat in a doorway. The afternoon takes you back toward the sea. You find a different route to the docks, discovering stairs you hadn't seen before. These ones gentler and wider than yesterday's steep descent. At the bottom, you walk along the shore away from the busy harbour, following the coastline where the city gives way to rocky beach. The tide is out, exposing tidal pools and rock formations that gleam with moisture. You spend an hour exploring the pools, crouching to peer into their small worlds. Anemones wave their tentacles in the trapped water. Small fish dart between rocks. A starfish clings to a stone, its arms spread wide, brilliant orange against dark grey. Traveller wades in the shallows, snapping at waves, having apparently decided that seawater is acceptable, if not preferable to fresh. You laugh at its antics, feeling lighter than you have in days. As afternoon moves toward evening, you make your way back up to the city proper. You're hungry again, and you remember seeing a food stall in one of the markets that smelled particularly good. You find it after some searching, a vendor selling meat pies from a cart, the crusts golden and flaking. You buy two, and they're hot enough to burn your fingers, rich with gravy and chunks of beef and carrots. You share one with Traveller, sitting on a bench in the market square, watching the day's commerce wind down. The stallholders are packing up, calling to each other, settling accounts, preparing to return home. The market transforms from busy to quiet in the space of an hour, and you watch the transition with interest. By the time you finish eating, the square is nearly empty, just a few people crossing through on their way to elsewhere. You return to the winking skeever as dusk settles over the city. The common room is filling with the evening crowd, louder and more boisterous than at breakfast. You order ale and find a table in a corner where you can watch without being drawn into conversation. Traveller settles at your feet, already half asleep, exhausted by a day of exploration. You sip your ale slowly, feeling the day settle into memory. The hidden garden, the children at the fountain, the tidal pools, the simple pleasure of a hot meat pie. These small moments, these quiet discoveries, they're the reason for travelling. Not just to reach a destination, but to experience all the small things along the way and at the end. Solitude has revealed itself gradually, layer by layer, and you feel you understand it better now than you did standing on the wall, watching the sunset, as beautiful as that was. When you finally climb the stairs to your room, you're pleasantly tired, satisfied. Tomorrow is your last day in solitude before whatever comes next. But tonight, you're content to fall asleep listening to the muffled noise from below, the distant sound of the sea, and travellers' gentle snoring from the rug beside your bed. Your last morning in solitude arrives with a clarity that seems fitting. The sky is cloudless, the air crisp, and the city wakes slowly, stretching into another day like it has for centuries. You rise early, reluctant to waste any of this final day sleeping. Traveller lifts its head from the rug, yawns tremendously, and follows you to the window where together you watch the first light touch the sea, turning it from black to deep blue to silver. You dress with care, gathering your few belongings and arranging them neatly in your pack. The room looks much as it did when you arrived, but you feel different, changed in small ways that accumulate into something significant. The journey from Riften has left its mark, written in calluses on your feet, colour on your face, and something less tangible but more important in the way you carry yourself now. Downstairs, breakfast is quieter than usual. Only a few other early risers occupy the common room, nursing tea and speaking in hushed voices as though reluctant to break the morning's spell. You eat simply, porridge with honey, bread with butter, strong tea that clears the last fog of sleep. Traveller receives its portion and eats with less enthusiasm than usual, perhaps sensing the change in routine, the preparing to leave energy that fills the air around you. After settling your account with the innkeeper, you step into the morning. The streets are nearly empty at this hour, just a few shopkeepers opening their doors, sweeping their stoops, preparing for the day's business. You walk without particular destination, wanting to see solitude one more time before you leave, wanting to carry its image clearly in memory. You find yourself climbing again, drawn to the heights as though needing one final view from above. The streets are familiar now, after days of exploration. You know which ones climb steeply, which have stairs, which offer the easiest routes upward. Traveller follows without question, trusting your lead as it has since that day in Falkreath when it chose to follow a stranger who offered food and kindness. At the upper levels, near the castle, you find a different section of wall than the one you visited before. This walkway is wider, clearly meant for regular patrols, and it offers views in all directions: the sea to the north, the city spread below to the south and east, and to the west, the road leading away toward lands you haven't yet explored. You lean on the stone parapet, feeling its coolness beneath your palms, and simply breathe. The morning light reveals details invisible at other hours. You can see the texture of the sea, not flat but textured with currents and wind patterns, darker patches where the water runs deep, lighter areas where it shallows over hidden rocks. The city shows its rooflines and courtyards, its gardens and hidden spaces. And beyond, stretching south, the land unfolds in layers: forest and field, river valleys and distant mountains, all the country you walked through to reach this place. A guard makes his rounds, nodding as he passes. An early rising merchant hurries by with purpose. But mostly you're alone with Traveller and the morning and the view. You think about the journey, not as a single thing but as its component parts. The first morning leaving Riften, uncertain but excited. The forest camps where crickets sang you to sleep. The high mountain passes where the air was thin and pure. Dragon Bridge's ancient stone dragon, the dog appearing at the roadside, hungry and alone, deciding to trust. Each moment distinct yet part of the whole, beads on a string that together make something beautiful. You realize standing here that the journey has given you something unexpected, not just distance covered or places seen, but a kind of knowledge that can only be earned through movement and time. You know now what your body can do, what discomforts you can endure, what simple pleasures, a warm fire, clean water, the companionship of an animal, matter most when everything else is stripped away. The city life you left behind in Riften seems distant, almost unreal, and you wonder if you'll ever fit back into that smaller shape again. But these thoughts are too large for the morning. You shake them off and continue along the wall, following it as far as it goes. At the western end you find stairs leading down to a lower terrace. You descend and halfway down discover a small garden carved into the terraced levels, a private space, or perhaps forgotten, hidden from the main streets. Flowers grow here in careful beds, pansies and primroses, their colours bright against dark soil. A small tree stands in the centre, gnarled and ancient, its branches spreading wide. You sit on a stone bench beneath the tree, and traveller lies at your feet. The garden feels separate from the city, despite being within its walls, a pocket of peace that exists alongside, but apart from the busy streets. You close your eyes and listen, birds singing, wind moving through leaves, the distant sound of the city waking, and beneath it all, constant and eternal, the voice of the sea. Time passes unmeasured. When you open your eyes, the sun has climbed higher and the morning is well advanced. Reluctantly, you stand. There's one more place you need to visit before leaving Solitude. The gates themselves, the entrance through which you arrived, the threshold between inside and outside, city and wilderness, the known and what comes next. You make your way down through the city streets one last time, memorizing details. The fountain with its wolf's head, the bakery where you bought sweet rolls, the narrow alley leading to the hidden garden, the square where children played. Each place holds a small piece of your time here, and you collect them like stones in your pocket, small weights to carry forward. At the main gates, guards stand watch as they always do. They don't recognize you from your arrival days ago. You're just another traveller preparing to leave. Nothing remarkable in that. Beyond the gates, the road stretches south, the same road you walked to get here, though you'll be walking it in reverse now. The thought brings no sadness, only a kind of quiet satisfaction. You came to Solitude, you stayed, you explored, and now you're ready to move on. But before leaving, you turn back one more time. The city rises behind you, magnificent and solid, built on its impossible arch above the sea. Morning light catches on windows and towers, on the banners snapping in the constant wind, on the waves far below where they crash against ancient stone. You've walked the length of Skyrim to reach this place, crossed forests and mountains, rivers and plains. The journey changed you, taught you things about yourself that can only be learned through the patient accumulation of miles. Traveller sits beside you, looking up with patient eyes. Together you've walked so far, shared so much, camps and meals, morning and evenings, the quiet companionship of the road. Whatever comes next, wherever you go from here, you won't be alone. That knowledge, that simple fact of companionship freely given and accepted, might be the most valuable thing you've gained from the entire journey. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with the salt air of solitude one last time. The guards at the gate shift their weight, waiting for you to move on or come back in, to make a decision. And you do, though it doesn't feel like deciding so much as following what comes naturally. You turn from the gate and walk back into the city, not leaving after all. Not yet. There's an inn where your room is paid for another night. There's time still to explore, to sit in gardens, to walk along the shore, to simply be in this place you worked so hard to reach. Tomorrow or the day after, or whenever feels right, then you'll leave. But this morning, standing at the threshold, you realize the journey doesn't end with arrival. The journey continues, taking new forms, offering new challenges and discoveries. Solitude isn't an ending, but a way station, a place to rest and gather strength before the next leg of whatever road calls you forward. You walk back through the familiar streets with Traveller at your side, heading toward the shore, where the tide is coming in, where the waves crash against rock with their eternal rhythm, where the sea stretches toward horizons you haven't yet imagined. The morning is still young. The day spreads before you, full of possibility, and somewhere beyond Solitude's walls, the roads of Skyrim wind on forever, patient and waiting, ready to be walked whenever you choose to set foot upon them again. The journey from Riften to Solitude is complete. The road has been walked, the distance covered, and you stand now at the edge of the sea with a loyal companion, the whole world still ahead of you.